Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this Evolve community series on producing content for virtual events. Today, we're going to be having a crash course in producing live events, and I couldn't be happier to be joined by these folks. When the folks at SwapCard reached out to me and said, "Hey, do you want to moderate a panel with Tess Vismail and Mahogany Jones?" and I was like, yeah, get me signed up. These are two of my favorite people in the event industry. Tess Vismail is the chief event executioner and event technologist at iSocial Execution Incorporated. Thanks for joining us today, Tess.
Thank you for having me, Brant. So excited to be here.
And Mahogany Jones, one of the greatest names in events, national corporate sales manager at Halifax Convention Center and founder, event producer at Event Specialist. Mahogany, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. Well, I think we need to dive right in it. So many people are floundering still. It feels like there's been these waves. That there was the initial wave of the folks that had events in June and they just had to get through it, or they postponed it to September, hoping that we'd be through all of this by then. And then they got into July and went, oh no, we're not going to be through all of this by then. And so then they had to take their events online. And then there's the folks that are, now looking out to November, December, thinking that they were going to be done, and they're having to take their events online. So these waves just kind of keep coming of people really needing to, I hate to use the P word, but it rhymes with divot, their events from in-person events to online events. So why don't we just take a quick moment? I know folks have probably read your bios, but why don't we start with you, Tess? Just tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and why we should listen to you when it comes to producing our online events.
Oh my, Brant, did you really put me on the spot like that? My
Yeah.
goodness. So I consider myself an ed tech educator. I like to really focus on getting everyone comfortable around technology, and that means I have to play in both spaces. I like to be the wedge and the glue between all the technologists, the real pure people who code, the AV team, all of them, and my fellow independent planners. So at my core, I am an independent planner who can speak both languages and make things run smoothly. That's what I like to do.
And Mahogany, how about you?
Well, I have had the privilege of producing hybrid events since 2008. And from that came a lot of experience and conversations with people like you, Brant, to bounce ideas off about how we produce events, how we use technology. And I like to describe myself as an event producer, but also that tech liaison who can work and speak the languages like Tess with the planners, and as well as the AV company, so that we can put the best event forward.
I got so excited to introduce you guys. I didn't introduce myself. Hi, I'm Brant.
He's great. He's fabulous. Fabulous, great.
I do event. I do event technology consulting at Event Technology Consulting. I thought I'd be weird and name the company what it does. I think one of the reasons that I love talking with you guys about this stuff is because you guys are both CMPs. I mean, you come from the planner side. You're not just coming. A lot of the tech folks that are out there, God bless them, but they're coming from a mindset of tech. They're coming from a mindset of software, of development. You guys are coming from the planning point of view and have been working in the technology space for quite some time. I think one of the big questions, and just a reminder, as you folks have questions coming in, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'll do my best to keep an eye on them there, or use the actual questions tab in SwapCard Evolve. So please be sure and drop those questions in as we go. But one of the biggest questions that I keep hearing is about that platform search. That people are really struggling to, how do I even get started? I don't know anything about this. For the folks that are, didn't have that first event in June and they're just now starting to plan for it for December, where do they go from here on their initial steps down the platform search? Let's start with you, Mahogany.
When it comes to platform choice, I like to say begin with what your goal is. Like, begin with the goal in mind. The technology is meant to work with your plan, not fit your plan into the technology. So I like to encourage everyone, when it's time to consider a platform, to really define what that event should look like. What are your must-haves? What are your needs? What are your nice-to-haves? Is it networking capabilities? Is it chat functionality? Is it video all of those types of things, but really begin with what your goal is and then allow somebody else to make the recommendations for what that platform should be. Match it to your needs, not the other way around.
I think it's a fantastic point. I can't emphasize enough with my clients and my students in my classes this idea of starting with the goals and objectives. And it seems like such a simple thing that we should be doing on all of our events, much less our online events. But for some reason, because we're so wrapped up in this idea that we're taking it online and that it's a techie thing, it seems to get left by the wayside so much, so very often. Just take that moment to breathe. Take that moment to think about, wait, why are we doing this thing? Because if you launch ahead into your online events without doing that, you're not paying attention to the wants and needs of all of your stakeholders. Tess, what do you think are kind of the first steps in addition to that, to taking those initial platform search steps?
Well, my favorite term is respecting the pause. So thank you so much talking about that, Brand. But you've got to develop your personas. I'm a big component of why are you producing something for an audience or stakeholders if you've never asked them what they want or how they want them. So if you can decide that and start with that first, then it's just like any other channel. It's either a newspaper, it's a billboard, it's a social media channel, it's a Facebook or the like, or then it's the event technology you're pushing the content in. It's just how you want to deliver it. But if you don't, you're going to miss it if you hadn't started with the beginning first. So we talk about goals and objectives when we got our CMP and matching that to our stakeholders. Well, why in the world do we forget that when we're in the process of producing, as if it's different? Like your phone is different, right? Your laptop is different. No, the platform is different. No, it's not different. It's just the how. Right. So developing those personas from different point of views, to me, is the key.
You guys have kind of both danced around it at this point. Is it fair to say that taking our events online, is that just a change of venue?
Thank you.
Bang, 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 bang.
We're going to be doing like the Zoom call jazz hands throughout this thing, I've got a feeling, because I know you guys, we're all on the same page on a lot of this stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mahogany, you were first to dive in there, so why don't you elaborate a little bit on that?
Wholeheartedly. I mean, this whole comment of virtual being new and all of this and the new normal and hybrid is the new way of doing things. We have been doing it for years. We have to reframe this mindset that everything is new and reframe how we're looking at things. It's a chance for us to reimagine. And your virtual platform, in my personal opinion, is really the change of venue. It allows you to change your scenery. We aren't looking at the platform as an aside or an addition to. It is part of the experience. But again, it can be the venue.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tess, along those lines, if that's just the change of our venue, if we're just moving it from, probably the second most common question that I get asked, and I'm sure you guys do as well, is how much is it going to cost? And the thing that I struggle with on that is this idea that it's like saying, well, how much do events cost in London in the spring?
Exactly.
Like you can't answer that question effectively and concisely. So Tess, how do you help folks kind of deal with this idea of the unknowns when it comes to cost and to changing that venue?
Well, it's still education at core, right? So I have to re-educate people around their vocabulary. How are they defining certain things? They'll send in information saying, I want this event, we've got to go virtual, and I need to do this. And they want to replicate what they did in real life, which is non-existent, right? So you've got to work backwards from starting with, like, wait, again, respecting the pause. Tell me what you need. How do you want to deal with this? Who is coming? Why are they coming? Do you know what they want? How much did you have in the budget for your AV before, if we're talking post-COVID right now, right? Did you think about how you went about deciding on that AV team for that? That's no different. You've got to go back to the basics and the elements of one-on-one meeting planning.
Absolutely.
It's so easy to forget, again, this idea that this is somehow different. This is something, that just because if you've been planning events for 20 years, that experience doesn't get thrown out. And I think a lot of honestly what I've been doing lately is just confidence boosting of like, hey, you know how to write an RFP. You know how to do these things. And, just because we've taken this on, how to walk an attendee through a journey. And I want to talk more about that later. But, these things. It's just a change of venue. It's okay. Relax. These kinds of things. We do have a question that came in, on the subject of platforms. And the question was that many of their clients are China based. And they have great difficulty finding a platform that can reach China. Do you guys have any insight into that whatsoever when it comes to platforms?
I was going to say that's a hard one. I do
It
actually
is.
get that a fair bit from the different platforms that are blocked. I honestly can't properly answer that one.
I'm
I
pretty
tend to
sure
defer to
Zoom
the colleagues in China.
I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
Zoom is one that you can get in China. I could be wrong on that, but I know
Well,
that there's
now
a
they have,
few platforms.
they just came out with end-to-end just yesterday, day
Yeah,
before yesterday. Encryption and encryption, they'll probably be able to do it. But what I try to do with people is say, look where you are now, right? What are your current clients who are in China, who are having meetings currently doing? See if
okay,
there are kind of creative things that you can do to work within what they can do. Like, for instance, when people think of China and tech, they think of WeChat just off the bat, right? You don't think about WhatsApp, you just think about WeChat. You got to use it, it's a part of their lives. So I would naturally go to, okay, well, what is WeChat doing right now? How are they doing this? How have they responded to this? And are there some things that we can do and utilize that platform that is already there in people's hands and they're comfortable with, to push some sort of content that I'm trying to push? Again, going down to the basics of who am I dealing with, what are they dealing with, and why what's comfortable for them.
One
I'll
thing
be
that
honest with
I
you.
feel like we should
Go ahead.
always, sorry, one thing I also think we should also mention is that we kind of glazed over it a little bit, but their opportunity to send an RFP when it comes to finding your event platform. So because we, Planners 101, we send RFP for every other service. We send RFPs even for our venue selection. Using that with your needs and wants, also list where your event will be held, where your attendees will be based, so that your platform providers can let you know what's available, where their servers are hosted, what capabilities they have for streaming to other countries. All of those types of things, I feel like, go into that RFP to make sure that you're covered. Don't leave it to guesswork and those after questions.
And Brand, I want to jump in there a little bit. Why can't we push the envelope even more in the RFPs and just literally say, this is what my attendees are expecting? Can you do it? Because the biggest thing when you're going to the tech companies is they're telling you marketing language. I don't want marketing language. I'm an old school Marcom girl, right? So I can read through what you're telling me, right? So everyone says they do virtual. No, that's not true. It's just how you do it and how you interpret it and how you define what that is. So we have to cut through all of that. So if we take the ball into our hands to deliver the RFP, or even just the basic inquiry with, this is really truly what I need, the heart of what I know has worked with my people, with my stakeholders, then push it. And they should be able to tell you, well, I don't do that. And you should say, okay, great. Well, what do you do? Or that's okay. Thank you. Next time.
Mm-hmm.
You brought up two fantastic points there, Tess. One of which is, let's be honest, with online platforms, 80% of it is the same, right? You got a chat, you got video, you got audio, you got a chat box, you got some questions, maybe you got some live polling, right? There's 80% of it's going to do like the 80% of it that you need. The thing is, by starting with those goals and objectives that you guys so rightly pointed out first thing, you're going to find out what's the 20% that's different for you. What's that 20% that's different for your organization, for your company? And then try and find the event app, the platform that's got that extra 20% difference that matches up with that. And so for our previous, question person, their 20% involves being able to do events in China. And so that might not be part of my event or your event. And so lining those things up. And then along those same lines, if you've sat back and gone back to the beginning, taken a breath, looked at the goals and organization and objectives, you have an opportunity here to expand your horizons, expand your mind, right? Expand what you're doing with your event. It doesn't have to be locked into the same time frames and the same agendas and things like that. Mahogany, can you expand a little bit on this idea of taking the opportunity to redesign your event a little bit now that we're no longer confined by time and space?
I love that. And I feel like this time has truly given us the opportunity to reimagine and recreate what our events look like. It's allowing us to dive back into these goals and objectives and also start to rethink, what do we actually need to keep in our event? What are we hosting these events for the sake of doing so? A lot of that seems to be coming out with whether or not we should be going virtual or not. I mean, truth be told, a lot of these events are just really there and they're a waste of money. They're not serving its core purpose. So it's allowing us to go back to this chance of reimagining and use it as a chance to really hone in on our expertise. We're the planners, we're on the team, and all of those ideas that I feel like we always had for the last 5 to 10 years, that we were always told we can't do it. The event always happens like this. We're not able to do that. This is actually our chance to shine and say, well, I have always wanted to produce shorter keynotes. I have always wanted to produce what our attendees are asking for, which is more networking, less content. Use this as leverage. And that is, me on my soapbox, but I feel like it is a huge opportunity for us. And I would like us to embrace that opportunity. No more events for the sake of doing them. No more virtual because we think we have to. Let's really rethink that.
It's so easy to get locked into our previous mindsets and to woe is me a little bit. Don't get me wrong. I mean, obviously the pandemic is terrible. There's, a lot of people that have lost their lives and lost their jobs, but as an industry, we do have an opportunity here. Whenever there is tragedy, whenever there is strife, there is opportunity. Tess, anything you want to tack on to this idea of pushing the bounds and expanding things beyond?
Yeah, I mean, I think that pushing the bounds is really, like Mahogany said, trimming the fat, right? And it's going to take us, like as I said, at my core, I'm an independent at my core. So the ways in which I can influence my clients, I need to take that, right? I need to actualize and step up and utilize that voice, right? And it's also time for me can I lead sessions with a client, with their stakeholders, their senior staff, or those people who are decision makers who were locked in a certain mindset now and say, you know what, can we revisit that point right now? Can we go back over that really quickly? Because we realize what COVID has done to the world, not to our organization, not to the US, not to our own country, but the entire world and the ramifications. So it's time to speak up again.
And being respectful of the fact that our attendees are going through all of this as well. I mean, it's not just our thing, right? It's they're all stuck at home. They've we've got distance learning going on, so the kids are at home. They're working from home. It's so understanding that things maybe are going to have to come in smaller chunks. Understanding that people are going to drift in and drift out as life takes over. I want to start moving kind of beyond the platform discussion into, now we've already kind of touched on design and things like that as well. One of the questions that came in is kind of a once we're in it kind of question. So I was saving it for a little while, but I saw a lot of people were upvoting it. Don't worry, I didn't forget you. And Angela was asking, we've got ongoing issues of emails generated by the platform going into spam filters. Any advice how we can better our chances or our platforms that are better than others? I've got my thoughts, but I want to get your guys' takes on it first.
I'll let Mahogany take that one because mine is going to be radical. So.
All right, nice.
I mean, my personal opinion is to use what you're already using for your own emails and stick to that. Most platforms allow for API integrations to be able to tie the registration sequence at least into that without having to use their platform. I know there are quite a few platforms that also brand, and this is another question to really make sure you're asking is who owns that? Who owns the contact information in the platform? because that is also something that we're starting to see, that the registrations going directly to platforms aren't necessarily coming back to the attendees, or to the organizer rather. So really being mindful of that. I mean, I'm a firm believer of making sure that things still connect to your CRM, so that emails that are going out for your events, you're still able to track the exact same way. So you tracked your registrations for your in-person events in your CRM. Why not continue to do that for the virtual space?
Yeah,
All
and
right,
I would
Tess, what's your
follow up to
radical
say,
solution?
well, I think from a radical standpoint is you got to go to what we missed, Brent, which is the core of the business of the platform that you're choosing, right? It's radical in the sense that you're not asking, you're listening again to the marketing conversation that, oh yeah, then we just added registration. Oh yeah, and then we just added this, right? But if your core, if you haven't asked them what their core is, that's how they would have built and developed their product from scratch. They'll always default back to that. And yes, your emails will get lost because that's not their core business. They just added that on. So it's not so much what specifically Angela should do in her case. She should go and look and ask the questions. What did you start with? You know, what is your bread and butter? Like, what is that sweet spot for you? Choose accordingly. And spam filters are devastating when it comes to that, but you got to staff it properly. Like, you need to me, I know we'll get to roles in a bit, but you need to make sure that someone in your organization is focused just on that aspect of the event and nothing else, because that is a task in itself.
I'll tack on just a couple of quick things to that already great advice. There's a couple things that I would recommend is, one, anytime you've got anybody sending mail on behalf of someone else. So if they're making it look like it's coming from your organization in any way, shape, or form, or so a reply to address comes back to your organization instead of theirs, that's when spam filters go, there's something not quite right about this email. It's sending on behalf of someone else, not directly from those emails. So the way that you can kind of get around that is, at the same time that you send out your first email, or that they're going to send out your first email, you as the company need to send out an email from your company, not through them, not through anything else, but somehow from your company, if it's at all possible, to your attendees to say, today you will be receiving an email about this event. If you do not, you need to go and check your spam filters. Just that real short thing that says, hey, great, looking forward to seeing you. Check your spam filters if you don't get something from us today. Yeah,
and Brent, just take it 2 steps further for them. Make sure that when they say that, they give an example of what the from will look like for visual people, right? Who like to see it and read it, right? On the fly, so they know what to go back and look for, or they can actually search in the search box for that piece of mail. And then you direct them and literally say, Angela, don't hide from them that they might go into spam. Say, and check your spam folder. Period. It's all about that education. It's those little things. That's the stuff I love. It's the little stuff that people miss, and then they throw everything off.
I knew this was going to happen with you guys. I mean, this hour is just going to fly by. So I'm feeling that simultaneous urge to want to go deeper into topics, but also to help keep things moving. While we're still a little bit kind of in design stage, prep stage, we're not to the day of our event. I know, Tess, you brought up roles. I want to hit on that. But while we're still in design stage, something you guys brought up earlier is the idea of mapping the journey for your attendees. Would either one of you want to take a moment to speak about things like personas? How do we really step through from start to end that attendee experience for our online events? Tess, why don't we go to you?
Okay, so I talked about personas and point of views earlier. And when you're starting, you got to ask them who they are and create these profiles for them, so that you know that every step of the way, if I am a person who likes visuals and audio, most people who know me well know I need to hear it and see it at the same time. It locks in. And if you don't design that journey for me so that I can see things and I can hear things from beginning to end, then I am going to have a challenge from you. And I might be one of your biggest stakeholders, right? And you need to do that for everyone. And then you need to think about, well, who is going to interact? What kind of content do I want to deliver to them, and choose accordingly, right? But then you've got to also put the people in place who are gonna have to deliver the content and hopefully ramp up your internal staff. But beyond that, you need to ask the questions along the way of the event tech company that you're choosing or the platform you're choosing. What kind of staff do they have to help support you? And ask those questions, the levels of those, right? The customer success journey is key. If they don't support you from a customer success perspective of what you're expecting, and you don't tell them ahead of time what you want of them, they may not have the staff to do it. And then it's left on you at the last minute, with hundreds and hundreds of people have dealt with that since March and even before that time. So you've got to then say, who is going to be the 30,000-foot person who looks at the journey that you've designed? Who is going to be the planner on it? Who is going to, like what Mahogany does, which I call her the virtual event or hybrid event goddess, right? Who's going to design that aspect where everyone sees it from a digital content perspective, right? And guides it along the way in the planning. And then you'll also have to have your crew for that day of, if it's hybrid, both in real life as well as virtually, if you will. And then on the back end, who's going to help and handle that? And then follow up. So it's kind of really a journey, but you got to start with the end in mind first, with the persona.
Mahogany, anything you want to add to that?
Not too much, just being clear on where you're trying to go. I know we have a few other
that's
points
okay
to
too.
cover.
That's okay too. I want to take some, while we're still a little bit in design world, and honestly, a lot of this is design, right? Execution is one thing, but the design is such an important stage, and I think it's worth hanging on it for a while longer. I want to try and combine a couple of different questions from Angela and Roy, dealing with networking and engagement. Angela's comment, by the way, Angela's on fire. She's got all kinds of great questions. She just keeps bringing them to the house. So Angela's asking about, they say that engagement is so important and we want to engage, but then, when we actually get to our event, nobody wants to turn on their cameras. Nobody wants to do, they're all just like going back into their shells. So how do you help bring them out? And then kind of to Roy's aspect of it, it's along the same lines. How do we encourage networking as that strong component, which people always say they really want or that they're missing from their in-person events? Mahogany?
Let's drill down on what networking truly means and what that engagement strategy really is when it comes to your attendees. And I can honestly say this is one of my favorite examples to give, is an event that was produced back in 2008 where I had to have a piece of humble pie. I was told, and what you're always learning from engagement, and this hybrid event, for example, when we produced this one, they said, we want the audience engaged. We want to make sure that they're asking questions. We want to do all of these things. Now, just think about this from the standpoint of the in-person. They actually took away the mics in the room to ask questions because they said their group likes to be peer-to-peer and have conversations. When we looked at their stats from the engagement, it looked as though there was no engagement. Why? Because there were no questions being asked directly in the chat function. There actually wasn't any chat. And the best part of this is this was an 8-hour event for lawyers. 8 hours of content delivered. No chat, very few people. When you check
Tess and I are wilting over here.
When you check the stats of actually how long they watched about 75 to 85% of the content. So define engagement. When you look at those numbers, I remember being told by the director at that time, well, this is a waste of time and money. It did not truly turn into engagement. I surveyed those who attended. Best event they attended. They didn't want to stop the flow of the content delivery, so they just stayed glued to the update that was given for those 8 hours. They were not interested in chatting, but that was perfectly fine for these lawyers. They didn't want to talk to each other in that sense, but for them, it was comfort. So to reiterate this point, I feel like we should ask, what do you define as engagement? Is it one-on-one conversations? Are you comfortable on camera? I know some events are really starting to ask that question. Would you like to network in the chat, or would you like to actually network video to video, to give your attendees the options of doing that? If I think of somebody who doesn't want to really be that social butterfly at the networking events, but they would rather do the one-on-one conversations, allow them to do that as well. I feel like we're so focused on what networking should be or what we expect it to be that we forget to ask what networking and engagement is for the attendees. Jazz hands
yeah,
again.
you got it. Let's be honest. You know, we're not always great at doing this in our in-person events. I mean,
Right.
more than a couple industry events, people who should know better. The networking, event was designed in a way that it was impossible to network. I'm not going
Right.
to call anybody out. Not going to call
Right.
anybody out. But we're not always perfect at this at our in-person events. But you raise a fantastic point about engaging the audience and finding out what is important to them, engaging your stakeholders. It's all again part of the goals and objectives conversation that we keep coming back to. Engaging all of your stakeholders and finding out what their wants and needs are.
Absolutely.
Mahogany, you gave an example of, someone who, we actually didn't want to network. Tess, maybe you can give us an example of how successfully someone has pulled off either networking or getting people to kind of come out of their shells a little bit.
I don't like to name names, so I'll give you like ideas of
Yep.
things. I have seen a few events where it was voice based. It was all around voice, right? And I love voice. Someone asked us the other day when we were on a session, like, what do you think is the trend in life going forward for tech? I think it's voice, right? I think we have to do voice activated options as well, and think about not only from the fact that that's future forward as around technology, but just accessibility. We are really truly forgetting the fact that COVID allowed us to shelter in place. Therefore, we gained audiences we would never have had before, because some people just can't leave their home, or some people just can't afford it. We've created more inclusive experiences as it relates to this. That's why the humanistic aspect of what has happened, we have to take advantage of it, and from an embracing standpoint. So I have seen a few that have incorporated voice along with you, watching people draw, right? Or listening or seeing that visual interpretation of what the speakers happen and giving them a room to talk, or just an actual room to go into. Another thing that I thought is really good that I've seen more people do, which people would say, oh, that's not a big deal, that's not around engaging, but it is, was I've seen, just from a tech support standpoint, someone just create an all-day Zoom room for the entire conference where people can go in there and they can fuss if they want to fuss, ask the questions, but they had a human, because that person needed a human to talk to and connect to. If nothing else, to say, thank you, you're doing a great job, right? And that still adds to that experience of that attendee. So those are the couple of things, Brant. I'll be quiet now.
No, I mean, it's always tough because, I mean, at this point, honestly, I think I've probably done 50 hours of Q&A sessions and webinars and things like that since lockdown. And people have so many questions about this, and they're hungry for information. We should probably try and get a little bit back to the topic at hand, which is about producing content and things like that. So, while we're still a bit in the design phase, and it dovetails to some of the questions that have come in about alternate types of sessions, pre-recording versus, trying to do things live. All of this kind of surrounds the idea of content and how we're delivering it and how to deliver it the best. So let's try and take it a little bit back onto that track. How do you guys help your clients decide, what's that balance between the different types of sessions versus more traditional sessions versus the hour, of focus that kind of you were talking about, Mahogany?
For me personally, I like to match it to what your goals are, but thinking of content in a sense of how can you best deliver that message. So for me, when I'm looking at an agenda, I like to think, what are the core messages we need to get out? What messages have to be said without being altered, any of those things? I like to say we want to be risk adverse in our content sometimes. And those are the videos or the pre-recorded sessions that I like to do, things that will make sure that we're going to weave the content through as planned. Anything that is live, I'm a little bit obsessive sometimes with having backups of the lives just in case things go down, but just being prepared for what you're going to deliver and that content. Another thing to consider is what is your production budget and value of expectation. If you're used to going to your in-person events with beautiful, elaborate AV, nice stage presence, nice intro videos, and things like that, I would love to really see that happen virtually. Think Netflix, think all of these other things like that for how you're delivering your content. Again, this is a chance for us to really make the content shine. We're going back to the purpose of the event, to meet and to learn. So let's use that in the design and the production of how you're doing your content.
Yeah, and I think it's you can also weave in a layered approach, right? You can say, well, I know I need to do pre-records but then think who's going to decide on your team, you know what? Well, the audience will know it's pre-recorded. Will they be offended by it, right? But maybe not. You don't know. But if it's done well, they won't, right? With the engagement, why in the world do you need to push how you do it in shorter sessions to me, right? And say, oh, well, I'm going to wait till the end to answer, let the pre-recorded, but I'm just going to let the speakers come in at the end to answer questions. Why not make it lively throughout in some form of fashion, right? Pause the video, bring the speaker up on the screen, let them say a couple of things, take them back down, break it, do it differently. So that's kind of what I think, Grant. You got to get creative with it and not be so rigid and cookie cutter.
And it begs the question, should you be even having a 1 hour session that's pre-recorded at all? If that's and then to go into a Q&A or 45 minutes and then a 15-minute Q&A, I find this format more engaging and more interesting than any presentation that would have a bunch of slides on here's how we give a production masterclass. It's so much more interesting, and that we know that the questions that are burning for the people that are attending are going to get answered. If I don't get to your questions, just a reminder that we are going to have a roundtable later on today where we can get into some more general topics about bringing events online. So just a reminder on that. And then also don't forget the next session that's coming up. So as we start to, I come from a technical background. That's my jam is dealing with lights and audio and all of those kinds of things. What can we do to help level that up when it comes to our presenters and even just avoiding the up the nose shots and the people who are talking to the it's so great to have to be here on your webinar today. It's really nice to see you. For anybody who might have clicked away, I'm not looking anywhere near the camera. So Tess, why don't we start with you? What can we do to kind of level up our production from a technical standpoint?
Well, if you don't tell them and you don't coach them, they're not going to know. And if you don't remind them right before they go on stage, they're not going to know. It has always been in real life, the role of the stage manager. They're the last look. Like I used to do work in the fashion industry for a number of years. I had to pull the show, organize the back room, make everything okay. And I did the last look. So before my models, when I worked for Macy's, hit that stage, I needed to make sure they were perfect in every step of the imagination. So the vision of the creative director was done before they touched the stage. That person has to be in place, right? Who talks to them from a speaker management perspective. Yes, they can be emailed. That's great. But that can be one person, right? But then who is literally talking to them face to face to tell them, stop looking down. Let's go ahead and look straight. Put your finger in the camera there. That's where you need to look. And again, it's education. It's the small things on education to prep them to get right. And if you don't do it, that's going to be your end result. It's going to show.
You can also always tell who's the person on the iPad in the Zoom call because of the tapping with their finger right over their face. Mahogany, any tips or tricks for increasing the production values as we're doing pre-records or even live speaker calls?
Absolutely. Consider your budget and see what you had already planned for avian production. It is not super expensive. And I say this with a caveat. I understand everyone always says, well, we don't have that kind of budget, but it does not break the bank to send a webcam, a ring light, and a lav mic. Like, it does not break the bank to do those types of things. When the budget will allow, again, protect your quality of delivery and consider a studio. Consider sending your speakers into a studio. We now have techs that we have all over. I mean, everyone's doing it all over the world. I say this in the nicest way possible if we don't know, but reach out to a local technician who can go into that person's home and help them set up to make sure it's there. We can also get remote access to cameras. So make sure that we send the proper equipment. I mean, we're sending laptops to some, send the laptop with the equipment, and then we take remote control so that we can adjust the cameras and things like that, so that we can protect the delivery of the content and allow them to be the expert in the content they're delivering versus the technology, because they don't need to be the expert in that. That is what we are there for.
Absolutely. And I'd want to just jump in there if I can and say, I talked about this term called the new hybrid back in May at an event that I was working in. And it's really truly about an ecosystem that we have to think about, right? People are now choosing to spend money on gift cards with Uber Eats, right? Or Postmates to send to people. And that infuses the local economy where you are. Doesn't matter where your annual event actually lives and housed or that's headquartered, right? Well, again, that same concept like Mahogany talked about, where I am actually infusing money into the community in which my speakers are, the community in which my attendees are, to hire people to help things run smoothly. And it doesn't have to just be from that production value. Can it be some things on getting people ready and excited? Rent a space so that your attendees can drive, jog, or bike there and get to know about what your event is ahead of time and through time. Why does it all have to be in 3 days or 2 days or in 5 days too, Brent?
Absolutely, and once again, you guys bring up like 19 different directions that we can go on. I'll tack on just a couple of observations regarding So one, we've got a lot of hotels and production companies that are hurting because they had all their in-person business, disappear like everyone else's. So as a result, they're creating small studios. Honestly, a hotel is several hundred small studios that are being cleaned on a daily basis.
Thank you.
So, just keep
Yes.
that in mind. You can bring people together and have them apart. You can still have, bring the gear in, the day before so that there's plenty of time to make sure everything's clean and wiped down. And then you only have 1 or 2 technicians there that were all wearing masks. I had to fly out to do one of those relatively recently to help produce a studio event. And, I felt very safe, right? We all wore masks and stayed apart from each other. And, only when the person was actually live on camera did they take their mask off. And then the other thing is, like you guys said, so many times, it's not just about the equipment, it's about talking through everything. And just having those 1-hour speaker prep calls make all the difference in the world. Being able to say, okay, don't put that window behind you. No one can see what's out there. Put it in front of you so that it lights up your face and you look fantastic. All of those little things really add up. Try every set of headphones you've got, every microphone you've got. You never know. This is one of my biggest tips, honestly, is you never know when the set of headphones that came free with a phone 3 years ago that you wadded up and threw in a drawer might sound better than the several $100 AirPods that you've got in your ears. And same with cameras, same with lights. Try everything. Just hop on a Zoom call by yourself.
Yep.
And record it and try different microphones, try different lighting, and then play it back and look at it. All of that can make a huge difference. And then the final thing that I want to emphasize, Mahogany, that you said is, those budgets is, the first thing I'm telling, all of my clients and my classes and things like that is don't throw away your venue budget. Don't throw away your travel budget. Yes, we might be able to, in the long run, reduce our overall budgets by going online, but take that venue budget and make that your platform budget. Because like we talked about at the very beginning of this webinar, that's your new venue. And now you've still got an AV and production budget. You're not trying to take that out of there. And honestly, we spend more on centerpieces sometimes than what it would cost to send a good camera, a couple of lights, and a good microphone to every one of our presenters. So, just really think through, like you say, don't just immediately go to, well, it's online, so it's going to be free. Tess.
Brian, I'm so sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. But
no problem at all.
To say is that, like, you can have a person to audit your agenda. You can have a person to audit your budget as it relates to hybrid experiences for your stakeholders, right? Because I can't use just virtual anymore. I have to have a hybrid because that's just how our life is going to be for the rest of our life. So someone has to take a stab at making those other adjustments.
One more key
point. You can do it once, then you have a template. Sorry, Mahogany.
That's okay. I was going to say one more key point that you actually made, Brant, that I want to just reiterate is that the platform does not equal production.
No.
And we spoke about this in another session as well, but platform does not equal production. And I feel like this, like you said, this whole notion that it's free because we're virtual is a myth. So we need to really look at that so that we're making sure that we are still producing. We are still adding an AV component. If we look at today's event, that in this session that we're delivering right now, without any production value, is a plain Zoom meeting that had nothing, no transitions, no checks, no sound, no lighting, low video quality. Like all of those things come into play. So
one of the big questions that constantly gets asked in these types of things is, how do we battle Zoom fatigue? And the really short answer that you basically just said, Mahogany, is don't make it a Zoom meeting. So if you don't want it to feel like a Zoom meeting, don't make it look like a Zoom meeting. That's where the production value comes in. That's where the lighting and the headsets and the talking into the camera and all of that kind of stuff, as opposed to staring down, and paying attention to your backgrounds and all of that kind of stuff, so that we can be a little more. You guys did dovetail into one of the questions that came in from the audience, which is, in the future, how will we produce events that should be both virtual and in-person events? Tess, you mentioned it, you brought it up, so we might as well go there. As we start to look forward, how does this start to fit into our overall event strategy, as we pretty much have to go to hybrid, at least for a little while in the in-between time?
I think I only disagree there to say we're going to be hybrid for the rest of our lives, period. We'll never be in real life ever again, only, right? And I think the how still go. I'm gonna let Mahogany take it because she is the goddess of hybrid. But the biggest, again, I'm gonna go back, and everyone ignores me. It's okay. You got to ask your people. You got to ask them what they want and how they want it, because we're gonna miss a huge population of people if we plan to say, okay, no, we're done with virtual. Now we're in real life. And forget the people who say, you know what, it was really great for me to take care of my kids and my family while I was enjoying this event. I'd like to do that in the future. I might have the money to put on applying there, but I choose not to. I'm going to choose again. So think about those people who are going to choose again. And if you don't ask them, that's going to be a challenge. So I think the best way to do again is ask them. Go ahead, Mahogany.
From a hybrid standpoint, I feel like we were already there. It's something that we've been doing, but this is giving us a chance to use our space in a better way. So when I think of hybrid, I always thought of the in-person experience as being sort of this micro experience that we're creating. The only difference now is that we add social distancing and different things within that experience, but use it to your advantage. I feel like our technology is getting better. Like we said, being able to have studios in hotel rooms and all of those things is already elevating our production value and is a true gift to the events. So really consider, if you think of something as simple as a sporting event, that to me is the easiest way to describe hybrid. When you're in person at the game, all 10 to 50 people, 200 if you're in Halifax, to attend. When you're watching those events, you're in person, you're listening to the commentators, you're listening to everyone, and you're feeling the experience in a different way. The TV audience is also experiencing that same event. So making sure that the production is still there. They're still recording the cameras, the live cameras from the in-person feed out to the audience and making sure that their experience is matched, making sure that we're not forgetting one over the other. If you have a really cool lighting and a great setup in person, design that online. I mean, have a look at this overview that we're in right now. Look how nice the brand colors for Swap Card are today. When you look at this, this would be translated to the in-person audience just like it would be the online audience. We really want to make sure that we're catering to both without forgetting. But it's a true marriage of an experience.
You bring up another fantastic point in that we're now not just walking through that audience journey for one audience. Mm-hmm. We're now having to walk through that journey for two completely separate audiences with completely separate experiences. Like you say, the in room is one experience, and then the at home is another experience. And if either one of those falls short, you're going to be affecting your future. If it's a paid event or a conference or something along those lines, if either one of those falls short, you're affecting your future, the likelihood that the attendees are going to come back. How do we make sure? Now that we're essentially having two simultaneous events with very different journeys, how do we make sure that we're covering all of our bases?
Agenda planning for me is what it is key. When you do your run of show, I feel like it's important when you're used to writing cues for lighting, audio, play this video, networking break. Add the caveat to what each audience is going to see. For me personally, I'm a little bit more visual and need to see it in a grid format to know that session A is going to happen with 3 speakers on the stage, whatever. What will it look like in person? What will it look like online? And then who's responsible for making sure it happens that way? But it also supports the AV production team and whoever we have supporting the event to understand that we need extra lighting on this or 30 seconds or whatever that delay is to make sure that the video is experienced by the online audience as well before we begin the conversations and things like that. So putting all of those cues into an agenda and a working agenda, I find is helpful.
Yeah, sorry, I should have specified that question was for the hybrid event goddess. Yes, go ahead. And,
look, I know when to defer and step back. Believe me. Yeah, I think, and I think all for those people who are new to the space too, you got to do something I used to do a long time ago, which is similar. Is you need to write your event from the end to the beginning, not the beginning to the end. I want to know what my end result is, and you got to write it all out, right? And again, it's the point of views from things, right? Because you won't see your gaps. I don't know how many times, like I love to execute. I planned for 30 years, but my space is executing. I take the plan and get it done. And when they give me the plan, I have to go through and say, yeah, but you didn't say this. You missed this cue. Okay, well then if this is going to happen over here, who is walking over there to pick that up to move this over here? Right? It's those, and that takes time, and then you're not building enough time. And so you kind of really have to think through every motion and everything that's going to happen for in person as well as for the digital experience of content.
One thing too, to add to that agenda is making sure there's no dead air for your virtual audience. I feel like that's one of those things too, like no dead space. Networking can happen, but you don't want your screen to go black. Even if it's a video reel with music playing, make sure there is something with a cue so that people know what is happening. You don't ever want someone to feel like they're missing out. Same for your in-person audience. Acknowledge that there's an online audience so that they know there are more people with them enjoying this experience. We want it to be unified.
Brant, I'm so sorry. I've got to say
no sound from Brant.
Hey, so if I could say one thing about that though, right, is that I was recently at an event. So NPI, my local chapter, just had their very first hybrid experience, right? And what we decided to do is something happened with the technology, right? From the feed that was coming into the audience. So and I asked the host to go on stage and use it as a teachable moment, but it brought out the fact that what people often don't do too is do I guess a risk plan is what I'm going to call it,
Yep.
where you're putting signs up for the in-person audience. Well, if this happens, then do that. Or you're giving them games on the table. You're giving them things to do and be engaged while something may go down at any point in time. Because people, as they're planning, are going to trust the technology is going to be as perfect as they thought their in real life event was going to be. And that's just not real. It's just not real, right? But if you had the fillers, similar to what Mahogany said there, but for in real life, where I say, okay, well, now I know I've got this little device on my table that I can play music on my own. I can push my own little button and our table can hear this and we can talk about these little conversation starters. But those types of things so that you are setting the expectation of your audience as they're experiencing it, just like you're setting the expectation of your digital audience while they're experiencing it.
Have you guys got me back? It sounded like I cut out for a little bit.
You're back.
Am I back?
You're
Fantastic.
back.
It just goes to show you that even when you've got all the tools and all the toys, things can still go horribly wrong. We do have to unfortunately start wrapping up. We're running out of time here, so we're going to do a real quick, literally like 1 minute or less lightning round because we need to wrap. So what's the one question that I didn't get to? The one tip that you've got for folks as we move forward, as concisely as possible.
Mahogany, you go first.
My tip is that this time has allowed us to collaborate with others without fear of rejection or any of those types of emotions that come into play. Ask your colleagues what they are doing and what are they seeing that work well. Ask Brant and Tess, how many times have I called to say, we just need this to work? Can you recommend something? So don't be afraid to ask. And leverage your AV partners. I feel like we forget that they've been around forever and a day. This is their wheelhouse.
It is still microphones and cameras and lights. So,
Yep.
they know a thing or two about that. Tess, how about you?
So I think my biggest thing is roles, ROLES, meaning know that we have new roles to play in hiring people and putting them in place to run the events, regardless of whether it's just digital only or if they're hybrid experiences. And you still have a role as a planner. It's just new and different. The AV team has a role. It's just new and different. And then there are people who can speak both languages and it's new and different, but their roles you need to define.
And bad moderator, I didn't come back to that. All right, well, we have to go. Tess Vismail, Chief Event Executioner, iSocial Execution Incorporated, and Mahogany Jones, National Corporate Sales Manager at Halifax Convention Center and founder, event producer at Event Specialist. And I'm Brant Kruger, Event Technology Consulting. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you later, hopefully in the roundtable discussions. Be sure and stick around because your next session is going to start automatically.